The old, dusty cabin stood alone in the middle of the dense forest. Its wooden planks, worn and weathered, creaked with every gust of wind. For years, the locals in the nearby village of Maplewood had whispered about the cabin's eerie history. Stories of strange noises, ghostly apparitions, and sudden disappearances had kept everyone away. But one chilly autumn evening, an invitation arrived that changed everything. The invitation was simple and direct, written in neat, cursive handwriting on a yellowed piece of parchment. You are invited to spend a night in the old cabin at the heart of Maplewood Forest. Those who dare to face its secrets will be rewarded. Meet at dusk. A friendly asterisk asterisk. For friends, each with their own reason for accepting the challenge, gathered at the edge of the forest as the sun began to set. There was Emma, a curious and adventurous young woman with a knack for solving mysteries. Beside her stood Jake, her brave and loyal boyfriend, always eager for a new adventure. Next was Laura, Emma's best friend, who loved the thrill of ghost stories but feared the dark. Finally, there was Mark, a skeptic and scientist, determined to debunk the myths surrounding the cabin. They looked at each other with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, knowing that this night would be one they would never forget. As dusk settled over Maplewood Forest, the four friends made their way down the narrow path leading to the cabin. The air was cool and crisp, the trees casting long dark shadows across the ground. The forest was eerily silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves. When they reached the cabin, they found the door slightly ajar, as if inviting them in. Emma was the first to step inside, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The interior was just as they'd imagined, old, dusty, and filled with cobwebs. The furniture was covered in white sheets, and the air smelled of damp wood and decay. Jake followed closely behind, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of danger. Laura clung to his arm, her fear evident in her wide eyes and trembling hands. Mark brought up the rear, his expression skeptical but intrigued. Well, we're here, Emma said, her voice echoing in the silent cabin. Let's see what this place has in store for us. Chapter 3: The First Night. The friends set up camp in the cabin's main room, lighting candles to chase away the shadows. They sat in a circle, sharing stories and laughing nervously. As the night wore on, the atmosphere grew more tense. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside, seemed to heighten their anxiety. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the cabin. They all jumped, their eyes darting to the source of the noise. It was the door to one of the back rooms, swinging open and closed as if pushed by an unseen force. Did you see that?" Laura whispered, her voice shaking. "It's just the wind," Mark said, trying to sound confident. "Old cabins like this always have drafts." But Emma wasn't convinced. She stood up, her flashlight in hand, and walked toward the door. "I'm going to check it out," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. Jake got up to follow her. "I'm coming with you." Together, they stepped into the dark hallway, the door creaking ominously as they pushed it open. The room beyond was even darker than the rest of the cabin, the air thick with dust and the scent of mildew. They scanned the room with their flashlights, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Just as they were about to turn back, a faint whisper filled the air. It was a woman's voice, soft and distant, but filled with sorrow. Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake nodded, his eyes wide with fear. "Yeah, I heard it." They quickly backed out of the room, closing the door behind them. When they returned to the main room, Laura and Mark could see the fear in their eyes. "What happened?" Laura asked, her voice trembling. "We heard something," Emma said. A voice. It was asking for help. Mark frowned. "A voice? Are you sure? It could just be the wind or an old recording." Emma shook her head. "And no, it was real. There's something in this cabin." Determined to uncover the truth, Emma suggested they look for clues about the cabin's history. They searched the rooms, opening old drawers and rifling through dusty books and papers. In the attic, they found an old trunk filled with photographs and letters. Emma carefully picked up a faded photograph of a woman standing in front of the cabin, a sad smile on her face. This must be her," as she said, showing the picture to the others. The woman we heard." They found a stack of letters tied together with a ribbon. Emma opened the first letter and began to read. "Dearest John, I fear I cannot stay here much longer. The loneliness is too much to bear. I hear whispers in the night, and I feel a presence watching me. I wish you were here with me. Love, Margaret E*****. As they read through the letters, they pieced together the tragic story of Margaret, a woman who had lived in the cabin many years ago. She had been waiting for her husband, John, to return from the war, but he never came back. Driven mad by grief and loneliness, she had taken her own life in the cabin. This explains the whispers," Emma said, her heart heavy with sorrow. "A Margaret spirit is still here, trapped in the cabin." Laura shivered. We have to help her. We can't just leave her like this." Emma suggested they hold a séance to try to communicate with Margaret's spirit and help her find peace. Mark was skeptical, but he agreed to participate. They gathered around the old dining table, lighting candles and holding hands. Emma took a deep breath and began to speak. Margaret, if you can hear us, we're here to help you. Please show us a sign." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the candles flickered, and a cold breeze swept through the room. Laura gasped as the temperature dropped, and the table began to shake. "She's here," Emma whispered. "Margaret, tell us what you need." The air grew thick with tension, and a faint, ghostly figure appeared at the end of the table. It was Margaret, her eyes filled with sorrow and longing. "Help me," as she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Find John. I need to know what happened to him." Emma nodded, her heart aching for the lost spirit. "We'll find out what happened, Margaret. I promise." The figure faded, and the room returned to its normal temperature. The friends sat in stunned silence, processing what had just happened. "We need to find out what happened to John," Jake said, breaking the silence. "Maybe that will help her find peace." The next morning, the friends left the cabin and headed to the local library to research John and Margaret's story. They spent hours poring over old newspapers and records, searching for any information about John. Finally, Emma found a newspaper article that caught her eye. It was dated 1942 and detailed the tragic fate of a soldier named John who had gone missing in action during the war. His body was never found, and he was presumed dead. Emma showed the article to the others. This must be him. He never made it back to Margaret." Laura wiped away a tear. A poor Margaret. She spent her life waiting for him. But how do we tell her?" Mark asked, his skepticism slowly giving way to belief. Emma thought for a moment. We need to go back to the cabin and hold another séance. We have to let her know what happened to John." That evening, they returned to the cabin, their determination stronger than ever. They set up the séance in the same room, lighting the candles and holding hands. "Margaret, we're back," Emma called out. "We found out what happened to John. He went missing in action during the war. He's gone, but he loved you until the end." The air grew cold, and the candles flickered. Margaret's ghostly figure appeared once again, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," as she whispered, her voice filled with a mix of sorrow and relief. "I've waited so long to know. I can finally rest." The friends watched in awe as Margaret's figure slowly faded, her spirit finding peace at last. The room grew warmer, and the oppressive feeling that had hung over the cabin lifted. The friends spent the rest of the night in the cabin, talking about their experience and the incredible journey they had been on. They knew they had helped a lost soul find peace, and that knowledge filled them with a sense of accomplishment. The next morning, they left the cabin, knowing that it was no longer haunted. The forest seemed brighter, the air lighter. They returned to Maplewood with a story that would be told for generations. Word of their adventure spread throughout the village, and the friends became local legends. The cabin, once feared and avoided, became a place of curiosity and wonder. People came from far and wide to hear the story of Margaret and the brave friends who had helped her find peace. Emma, Jake, Laura, and Mark remained close, their bond strengthened by their shared experience. They continued to seek out mysteries and adventures, always ready to help those in need. Years later, Emma found herself back at the cabin, now a respected historian and author. She stood on the porch, looking out at the forest, and smiled. She knew that the cabin story would live on, a testament to the power of friendship, courage, and compassion. The cabin, once a place of fear and sorrow, had been transformed into a symbol of hope and redemption. It stood as a reminder that even in the darkest places, there is always a chance for light and peace. And so, the story of the haunted cabin continued to inspire and uplift, a beacon of hope for all who heard it. The legacy of Margaret and the 4 friends who had helped her would live on forever, a testament to the enduring power of love, friendship, and the human spirit.